broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to WilmsFront. It's been a while. It is Friday, the 24th of October, 2025. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel, the WilmsFront Rumble channel, as well as my WilmsFront X account. In 1975, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's radio Lateline host, Richard Neville, interviewed three pederasts, or pedophiles as they should be called, who gloated about having sex with boys. The broadcast quite rightly provoked outrage. The Reverend Fred Nile obtained a recording and referred it to the New South Wales Police Vice Squad, but nothing came of this investigation. But there are also hardly any consequences for the ABC or the host, Richard Neville. The ABC chairman at the time, Richard Downing, defended the broadcast, arguing, in general, men will sleep with young boys, and that's the sort of thing the community ought to know about. The ABC claimed for 50 years that the recording had been destroyed, probably to cover up its on-air glorifying of pedophilia, but my WilmsFront guest tonight obtained the recording from the ABC in 2023 and has now published it on X, despite legal threats from the ABC. John Adams, thank you for what you have done in the interests of the people, which is also the name of your show with a fellow economist, Martin North.
Great. Thank you for having me, Tim.
Now, I'll start. How did you obtain this tape? Because the ABC actually said in a Senate estimates that the tape had been destroyed, but you got a copy which showed that the ABC lied to the Senate. So how did you come to uncover it?
Sure. So basically, Gerald Henderson from the Sydney Institute, who's also been quite famous for being on Sky News, as well as Insiders on the ABC itself. He wrote a series of columns around 2014, 15, 16 about pedophilia, about this particular recording. He was calling out the hypocrisy of the ABC. The ABC in that period of time was going quite aggressively against the Catholic Church for promoting pedophilia, or not promoting, but engaging in pedophilia and trying to cover it all up. And so Gerald Henderson basically said that the ABC is full of hypocrisy, given their activities with this, particularly this 1975 recording. So that's the first time I heard about it, and I read a column in 2015, and the column stuck with me. And I was curious about this recording and the way it was sort of described by Gerald Henderson. So it just so happened that in 2023, I put in a Freedom of Information request to the ABC. I said, "There's a column here by Gerald Henderson talking about this recording from 1975. Do you have it? And if you do, I want it under FOI." And that they basically said to me, "You need to go to the archives department." So the ABC has a community access program for historical content. And lo and behold, when I went to that department, they said they had the recording. So I said, "Can I obtain a copy?" So they said, "Sign this piece of paper," which had some legal conditions, and it's called a personal use release form. And basically the condition was that I would listen to it in a private setting for personal use. And I agreed that I wouldn't share it with anyone, wouldn't broadcast it, and just sort of kept it to myself. And so did sign the form, paid some money, and then I got the recording. And to be honest, Tim, when I got the recording, I didn't actually know what I was listening to. And also at that point in time, I didn't actually understand the significance of the ABC telling Parliament that the quote was, "There's no record of the interview." And then obviously in the last week or so, I've spoken to Gerald Henderson, who had never heard the tape until last week. And he basically said that in 1975, the ABC had said on the record that they had abolished, they had destroyed the tape. So I didn't fully understand the significance of it. But then when I heard the tape, I just couldn't believe my ears to say, is this really an ABC sanctioned program that went live to around the nation? And lo and behold, that it is. And so that's how I became aware of the tape, and I knew it was a very significant recording. But over the last couple of years, I've been busy pursuing other forms of government corruption and government incompetency. So it was something that I knew at some point I was going to release, and but I held it on for a couple of years, and then about a month ago, I said to my co-host, Martin North, it's time to reveal this existence of the tape. So we did a recording on our YouTube program in the interest of people. Our first show of our first season of our new season is called it was called Australia's Secret Pedophile Tape, and this was the first time that we sort of introduced the concept of the tape to our audience and to the broader public. And that first show got I think over 112,000 views, so it got became quite viral, and people started talking about this, about the tape and etc. And yeah, so basically from there, I asked the ABC to release me from these conditions, so that I could actually, show the public elements of the recording, and they they said no. And then we asked our audience to write to the federal minister, Annika Wilms, because under the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Corporation Act 1983, the minister has the power to direct the ABC to publish content on its digital platforms if it's in the national interest. So I argued that this was in the national interest, that this had been concealed from the public for too long, and it was, if we are to tackle child sex abuse, the more transparency and exposure, the better society will be. And about 2 weeks ago, the minister said that she wouldn't intervene. She respects the so-called independence of the ABC. So basically, I got fed up, and so I said to Martin that I'm not going to be sort of silenced by the ruling elite. So I said we're going to publish it, and that's what we did last week.
I had no idea about this program or who Richard Neville was. When I listened to the tape, I was just so angry. Now, a few of us who, I'm not sure if you're aware of the pedo poacher Alex Rosen, but obviously he is interviewing these pedophiles to expose them and then hand them off to the authorities. But what made me so angry about listening to this, some people have said they could only get through 5 minutes of it, but the fact that the host Richard Neville is giving them, it's a platform. Basically, there's minimal pushback, and they get free rein, these pedophiles, to gloat and justify their sex with boys. And the fact that there was also no consequence for these pedophiles, or that the host Richard Neville's reputation wasn't destroyed, that was more shocking to me. And on top of that, it was broadcast on a taxpayer's expense, and there was literally no consequence for Rich Neville or the ABC.
Well, I mean, one thing that I've said on a number of platforms is that Richard Neville is a self-confessed pedophile. So now the broadcaster dealt with homosexual pedophilia, men sleeping with boys, but in a book called Power Play, published in 1970, Richard Neville admitted that in his late 20s he had sex with a 14-year-old girl in the UK. So the reason why there's no minimal pushback is because Richard Neville himself had partaken in similar activities to the pedophiles on the recording. So it was a meeting of the mind, so to speak. So obviously, as you say, there was no pushback during the recording, and the pedophiles just basically tried to explain, what they do, how they do it, why they do it. I've read during the 1990s there was an inquiry by the Woodrow Commission into pedophilia in New South Wales and police protection of pedophilia, and so there's been plenty of victims that have gone on the record, and there's been documentary evidence, etc. But this is the perhaps the most unique recording in Australian history, where you actually hear people. It's not an interview per se. I call it a confession. They're basically confessing to their crimes,
Well,
and
it's their bragging, confessing. This is the
yeah,
most shocking thing. They're proud of it.
yes, totally, totally. And yes, so a lot of people are now asking, who are these people on the tape? And so I don't know who the people are. I mean, all I know is Richard Neville, the host. The three pedophiles and the teenager on the tape provide their first name, but they provide nothing else. Having said that, we have had someone come forward in the last few days to the office of John Ruddick, MLC, Upper House MP for the Libertarian Party in New South Wales, and they received an email from someone. I won't reveal their name yet, but they are apparently a former police officer who operated in the 70s and 80s, and they know the men on the tape. And so, as we go forward into next week, John Ruddick's staff will speak to this individual and try to solicit more information about who was on the tape, but also why was there an effort to protect pedophilia in New South Wales by the police, and obviously why was there no response by the police when Fred Nile went to the police in the subsequent 24 hours after the recording. So one thing that a number of people have picked up, Tim, by the recording is you can tell by the way the pedophiles speak, they're not working class people. So these are more upper class individuals. So obviously we don't know, who they are and what their professions were. So, but obviously if they're part of the creme de la creme of Sydney society, these people could have had, all sorts of connections to the judiciary, to the political class, to law enforcement, and so I don't think these are just run of the mill individuals. So it'll be very interesting to see if we can identify who these people are, and obviously another key point is that in 50 years, not only did the ABC conceal the existence of the tape, they've never apologized. They were asked by Senator Betts to apologize in 2016, and they flatly refused to apologize for the recording. And now that everyone has heard it, what I'm planning to do very soon is I probably will write a letter directly to the managing director and basically said, now that the ABC has been fully exposed, it's time for the ABC to come clean on the record and offer an unreserved apology to the Australian people for the recording. Now, one thing I can reveal to him, that I received a phone call from one of the advisors from the federal shadow minister's office, Melissa McIntosh, and this issue of the apology is hopefully something that the opposition will pursue with the ABC, because a lot of people believe that when you've done wrong, you should offer contrition, and I think as an institution, the ABC failed the public back in the 1970s. And obviously at the same time, Jimmy Savile was roaming around in the UK with the baby.
Yeah, there's also the British connection with this recording, because Richard Neville had spent many years in Britain trying to get a British version of his obscene Oz magazine circulated, including a school kids edition which solicited teenage submissions. And one of the pedophiles on the tape mentions his molestation, that's what we should call it, of this boy, and bragged about how the courts couldn't get a conviction. And it did seem that in the 1970s, the child sex tourism was rife in Britain. I mean, we now know what was happening inside the BBC, the ABC's British equivalent.
Yeah, totally. One of the key points about the 1970s, Tim, that some people have said to me was that during that period of time, homosexuality that was a criminal offence in many parts of Australia. So the push for gay rights decriminalisation that was heavily tied in with people who were pro-pedophile, and rather than making a distinction between consenting adults and children, it was all mixed in together. And one of the things that they tried to do in the recording was that they tried to justify, um, you know, in terms of pederasty, and they said that that's a distinction from pedophilia because these boys give consent, and yet 12-year-olds can't give consent at all. And
This has long been an argument by these pedophiles to try and justify their actions.
Indeed, and when you listen closely to the recording, you can hear the logical inconsistencies, because on the one hand, they say it's consensual, but on the other hand, they say that as these boys grow older, they come to resent the activities they had with the pedophile. So if it's consensual, there should be no resentment later on when they grow up.
And they
And
become
yet,
heterosexual.
well, exactly, yeah. I mean, the thing is that that's the other thing is that by the time they hit 15, 16, they realize that they actually like girls, which is obviously natural for like in terms of in terms of the human species. But in the last few weeks, Tim, I've had the opportunity to meet one of the victims of this pedophile ring that was notorious in New South Wales. I mean, we had a chronic pedophile problem in Newcastle, Sydney, and Wollongong. And in relation to Wollongong, I mean, that's where I live at the moment. We've had two former Lord Mayors who were pedophiles. One guy called Tony Bevan, who was a Lord Mayor in the 1960s, and he was specifically named in the Woodrow Commission as evil. And he ran pedophile parties in Wollongong. He was importing pedophile videos from the United States, and he was not just a pedophile; he was a pimp. And he was a pimp to the other Lord Mayor, which was Frank Arkell. And Frank Arkell was Lord Mayor from about 1973 through to 1991 here in Wollongong. He was a very famous and popular Lord Mayor, but a lot of people didn't know what he was doing behind the scenes. In relation to Tony Bevan, the Wollongong police knew all about him and his activities as early as the mid-70s. And for about 15, 16 years, he was untouched until he passed away in 1991. And then in relation to Frank Arkell, he was famously murdered in 1998 after he was outed in the state parliament by former Labor sort of MLC Frank Arena, who named Frank Arkell and others on the record using parliamentary privilege to basically say that, who they are and what they were doing. So Wollongong has a very bad history in terms of these activities, and some of it actually stems from a number of these pedophiles who were adults were actually victims of pedophilia themselves, dating back to the 1950s in one of the local Catholic boys' schools, which is still running in Wollongong today. So some of these schools have a very bad history, and when you engage in this activity, the trauma that has the impact of the trauma on these boys, in many cases, it destroys their lives. And we actually have a new parliamentary inquiry in the New South Wales Parliament into unsolved murders. So this is being, and this was established last week by pushed in the upper house by Jeremy Buckingham MLC, who's for the Legalised Cannabis Party. And I've spoken to him a few times on the phone extensively, and he believes that Ivan Milat, the most notorious serial killer in Australian history, was a victim of pedophilia, and he was a victim during this period of time of the late 1960s, right throughout the 1970s. So this issue has a massive impact on victims, not just immediately, but for in terms of decades after the offence. And my view is that if you're going to try to tackle this situation and actually try to ensure that it doesn't happen going forward, you have to inform the public about how deep this problem goes and who's involved, and there should be no stone unturned. I mean, like, you can't on the one hand just expose the Catholic Church, and yet there are other elements of society that's doing the same thing, and you keep that hidden from the public. That's not going to solve anything. And obviously there's political reasons why the ABC didn't want to air their dirty laundry, because obviously Richard Neville was seen as a cultural icon of the political left, and people on the left don't want their own side to be exposed in a way that they were happy to expose, for example, the Catholic Church, and obviously people very close to the Catholic Church, like in terms of George Pell. So you have this so you have a left-right divide politically on this issue, and in my view, it doesn't matter if it's the Catholic Church or people in the hard left. Pedophilia is pedophilia. It's all evil. It's all criminal misconduct. It all has to be exposed, and you have to call it out. No matter where you find it. And so for me, when I saw roadblocks from the ABC and from the minister, and obviously we have a Labor minister at the moment, and Labor's obviously who have historically been very pro ABC. To me, it was just unacceptable, and so I was prepared to take the risk of civil litigation by the ABC, and here we are about almost a week. We're coming up to 2 weeks since I published the tape, and so far I've heard nothing from any lawyers, and a number of people think that the ABC won't come through with their threat of litigation because they're just going to amplify the story. So again, if they sue, then I guess we'll have a situation in court. But if they don't sue, well then I guess I called their bluff and I was able to get away with it. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens in the next little while.
It'd be outrageous of the ABC to sue you, take you to court, spend taxpayers' funds because you exposed a pedophile recording that they made. And in my opinion, the ABC, it's supposed to be our ABC, but it's more their ABC. All of it should be for the public. It's funded by the public. And I noticed that the ABC, they provided a statement to Mumbrella, which they said that it doesn't meet current editorial standards. It was a mistake to air it in 1975, but they didn't apologize. But they said it would be inappropriate to publish the audio due to risk of harm to the community and may feed into perceptions and conspiracy theories that the country's elite are corrupt and involved in covering up such issues over many decades. So we want to suppress this tape so people don't think that the country's elites are covering up pedophilia. So we're going to try and cover up this tape.
Well, I mean, the one of the interesting things, Tim. So obviously I started with this tape, but and obviously we have the situation of the Epstein situation in the United States where elite pedophilia was happening, and obviously a blackmail ring was also happening, and obviously in the last week, in terms of Prince Andrew, he's resigned as a royal, even though that they the whole theory of the monarchy is based on the divine right of kings, but Prince Andrew's lost his titles. He's no longer going to have any official duties, and some people think that Prince Andrew is going to go to jail for what he did in terms of Jeffrey Epstein. So you have a situation in the US in terms of elite pedophilia. You had a situation in the UK, and obviously if you look at Prince Charles, I mean, his uncle was a pedophile, Lord Mountbatten. His best friend was a pedophile, Jimmy Savile. His brother's a pedophile, and then obviously you have a whole network of pedophiles operating in upper society in the UK that was all protected, and by politicians, the media, police, etc. And in the case of Australia, Tim, obviously I start with this recording. Obviously we know that there has been a historical child sex abuse pedophile problem, but on the question of have we had elites running this country who were groomers or pedophiles, there's more to the story, and and there are some things that I'm aware of that I haven't said publicly yet, in terms of it now. And what I can say about what's on the record is that in the case of New South Wales, we just had the former member for Kiama Gareth Ward, who was charged and convicted with rape. Look, there was one a boy under the age of 18. There was one man who was in his early 20s. So that person's been convicted, and he's awaiting sentencing, which will happen next week. And we'll have to see what happens with Gareth Ward. And then there's another state MP who's been charged with pedophilia called Rory Amon. So these are on the record of one conviction, one charge against two Liberal politicians, and yet there's a lot more that's been happening inside the Liberal Party in New South Wales that people. So I'm recording here from my house. I've had Liberal Party operatives in my house over the last 4 or 5 months detailing a whole series of practices that have been happening in the last decade in terms of the most senior levels of New South Wales Parliament involved in very similar activity. So don't be surprised if more of this situation was to come up. And in terms of on the question of grooming, now it's a factual matter that Mark Latham, the former leader of the opposition 20 years ago for Labor, and now he's a independent in the upper house of the New South Wales Parliament. He started off his career as working for Gough Whitlam. Well, and we all know that we all understand the public narrative that Gough Whitlam was heterosexual, and he was married and he had children. Well, only in the last month did Mark Latham put out a number of tweets about Gough Whitlam's activities with boys, homosexual sex, and including events that happened in Paris that Mark Latham was a direct eyewitness to. So some of these tweets are still up on Twitter. Some of this has been, I had Jeremy Buckingham point out these tweets and actually told me the historical significance of the Latham tweets. But there is a very serious situation, and obviously the big speech from 2015 that still echoes, particularly in social media today, is the Heffernan speech about judges, barristers, lawyers, politicians engaging in elite pedophilia, and the Wood Royal Commission not being prepared to expose any of those people, and the famous 28 names on the list. So I think we do have a very significant elite pedophile problem in this country, both historical and contemporary. And again, we have very strict defamation laws in this country. But the more you dig into this area, Tim, you'll be surprised with the type of people coming forward with all sorts of stories about what has been really happening in terms of political circles in this country. It's quite shocking.
Well, you can't defame the dead under Australian defamation law. This is why we can talk about Richard Neville and Gough Whitlam, who are both dead, but we can talk about people who have been convicted. And from the Labor side, Milton Orkopoulos, who was a minister in the Morris Yemma government, he was found guilty of, in the end, I think over 50 child sexual assaults, including supplying them with heroin and cannabis. And the most, if that wasn't disgusting enough, the New South Wales Labor Party blacklisted the whistleblower in his office, Gillian Snedden, who didn't get another job in the Labor Party. Absolutely disgusting.
All right. Okay. So I'm aware of Milton Acropolis because his conviction's well known, but in terms of the blacklisting by the ALP of the staffer,
yes.
Look, to be honest, that's something that I haven't come across personally. But is there anything on the so your information, is that on the public record?
Yeah, I remember it from 20 years ago, and I put it into Grok today. Was the whistleblower in Milton Acropolis office punished?
Wow. Well, and one of the things about the 1990s is, I mean, you had two Labour MPs, one in 1994, exposing, basically calling out police for protecting pedophiles, and then obviously you had Frank Arena naming a whole host of individuals involved in covering up pedophilia among elite circles, and the Labour instigate, well, not only Labour but the government instigated an inquiry into Frank Arena on the question of did she abuse parliamentary privilege by giving a sort of quite exposing speech. So rather than actually doing things to protect the public, they went after the people prepared to speak up, but also the only thing I can say in my case is that there's no conspiracy theory. There's no lack of evidence. I mean, what I published last week was a recording that people, in their own words, basically said everything that had to be said. So yes. So I think that last week really helped advance the conversation, because moving forward, it's not something that the public, the political class can ignore, because there's no lack of evidence. The evidence is right in front of you, and whether it's John Ruddick or Senator Roberts in the Senate, or even now the Shadow Minister for Communications contacting me today, I think we really sort of broke a cultural barrier last week, and I think this tape will echo on for quite a while. And I mean, 230,000 views on X is phenomenal for some of the things I've done in the past. And before it got taken down, we had about 23,000 views on YouTube, and obviously there's been now copies on Rumble and BitChute, etc. So as we go forward, this tape will continue to spread around, and people will tell their neighbors, their friends, their parents, their children, hey, have you heard this pedophile tape from 1975? And I wouldn't be surprised that in the next few months it becomes quite embedded in Australian culture in terms of contemporary thinking. The establishment will have to, particularly the ABC, I think they'll have to do a lot to regain trust, because for a lot of people, so I think a lot of people on social media tend not to believe the ABC anyway, but now they have very good reason to not trust them at all. I think again, I'm proud to say I've caused irreparable damage to the ABC, because I think the ABC is culpable in this evil activity, and they have to be held to account.
Yes, and there needs to be a reckoning today, and also definitely a reevaluation of the ABC, and also the legacy of Richard Neville, who was lionized when he died in 2016 by the ABC, and his whole goal seemed to be, let's see how many of society's morals we can destroy. I mean, it was in the 60s, the sexual revolution. It's these pedophiles in the 1970s tried to ride that, and as you mentioned, attach themselves to the gay and lesbian liberation movement. There was the pedophile information exchange in Britain, which incredibly received taxpayer funds, which was exposed by Mary Whitehouse, who people called her an old prude, but she really exposed just what was trying to be pushed on, what people were trying to push in British society. And then over in North America, there was the North American Man-Boy Love Association. But thankfully, all of these pro-pedophile groups, they all failed in their goals, which is something to be relieved about in the present day. But there's still so many who got away with all of it.
Yes. Well, I mean, the thing is that that is correct. But in terms of this inquiry that the New South Wales Parliament is running now, which is they're running an inquiry into unsolved murders from 1965 through to the early noughties. And this inquiry is going to focus heavily on Ivan Milat and his connections to pedophiles in New South Wales and him being a victim of pedophilia. So I think a lot of the forgotten history and some of the history that has yet to be exposed. I think there's quite a bit of work that's going to happen in New South Wales, and I plan to go to Sydney quite soon to talk to Jeremy Buckingham about the inquiry, and and that should be a very interesting set of events that are coming up very soon, and we'll obviously see in terms of where we go forward. But now, kind of like I said, there's other activity that's been happening around the place that I'm aware of, and I haven't decided as to whether I'm prepared to say everything that I know, because some of it is sort of still speculative. But there needs to be a bit more work that has to be done before we really push the envelope into contemporary events beyond what's already on public record. So yeah. So no, look, I mean, a lot of people have responded very strongly to the tape. Some people have come forward and said that they were victims. Some people said that they know about certain activities. And one of the shocking things, Tim, that I've come across is people are saying to me that the issues of pedophilia in 2025 are as bad as they were in 1975. So, according to some people, particularly when it comes to the foster care system and child services that the New South Wales government is running, things have not improved at all, and things are just as notoriously bad in 2025 as it was in 1975. So it seems like there's a army of people doing good work in this area, and I know that there's a documentary maker who's making a documentary trying to tell the stories of what happened in the 1970s. And now that we've released this tape, I think this tape will feature heavily in terms of the cultural narrative as to what happened in the past, and what's going to be happening. In terms of what happens in the future, I think I think it's important that we sort of reshape the narrative and we sort of expose how bad the situation used to be, so that people can be fully aware of again the current risks, and obviously what can be done to protect all children from in terms of this sort of activity.
Because in the internet age, the pedophiles, they all try to evade detection on the dark web, and they still try to embed themselves in professions with children. I mean, we've had the massive pedophile scandal in the Victorian childcare system here, just absolutely horrific. And sadly, when it just seems to keep repeating itself, there seems to be, you hear about childcare or teachers being either arrested for molestation or arrested for possessing child pornography. So, like, thankfully, the pedophile political movement was defeated, but certainly the pedophiles, they're trying to find ways to exist and carry out their heinous acts within our current society.
Yeah. And I think, look, in terms of the Victorian story that happened about 2 or 3 months ago, where you've got pedophiles in childcare centres. I mean, that was obviously a very shocking revelation, and obviously a lot of parents very concerned in terms of that whole situation. So, I mean, I don't know if there's any published research about what percentage of the population has an inclination of being a pedophile. I mean, one thing that's sort of come through in the history for me is that if you become traumatized as a child, for some people they do become pedophiles as they become older. So the situation in Wollongong is definitely that some of the adult pedophiles were victims themselves. So one thing I think that can be said is that the earlier you intervene and stop this practice, the better chance that you can stop adults engaging in terms of this activity, and we can have safer in terms of safer streets and obviously safer environment for children to go play.
Yes, because it's just so distressing to continue to read these articles which talk about what these children have been subject to, and obviously, as I mentioned before, the pedo poacher Alex Rosen. I mean, he is catching a lot more than the police have the resources for. So he's doing important work as well. But certainly, and I've spoken about this on my show, the in terms of the modern context, certainly there needs to be parents need to be more active with their children.
Yeah, totally.
And as you mentioned, it's good that the federal Liberal opposition are going to question the ABC. Hugh Marks is the current managing director. When he next comes before Senate estimates, I also hope Sarah Henderson, who herself is an ex-ABC journalist, also grills him as well. And also the fact that they lied to the Senate. And why did they say it was destroyed when they kept a copy? Because in the 70s, junking, as it was called, destroying old tapes was common. So, for example, there's lots of tapes missing of the countdown from the ABC because they were destroyed. There should be investigation why it was preserved and then why they said it was destroyed. And the fact that Jared Henderson, he's written heaps of correspondence to the ABC with his media watchdog, part of the Sydney Institute he runs. The fact that he was lied to for so many years. Also, this is quite a long question, but did you also reach out to Fred Nile? I know I'm not sure what his health is. He's 91 years old, whether he still had the recording?
No. Well, I mean, look. So unfortunately, Fred Nile is in a nursing home, and his health is not particularly good. So, no. Well, funny enough, Fred Nile's last chief of staff before he retired from politics actually works for John Ruddick. So basically, before I released the tape, about a month ago, I went to Canberra and played the tape for Malcolm Roberts, and then John Ruddick requested that I come to State Parliament in Sydney and play it for him and one of his staff members, and his staff member is actually Fred Nile's former chief of staff. So that was a very unique connection. Someone who had worked for Fred, and I think they finished around 2022, 2023 with Fred, and now he's working for in terms of John Ruddick. So unfortunately, don't know whether Fred still has the recording or not. Now, one thing I should say is that there are a few copies of this recording in some state libraries and university libraries around the country. I think the University of Queensland has a audio cassette version of the tape. I think the New South Wales State Library also has a version of the tape. So there's a couple of copies of this tape floating around, but obviously it's on cassette. And how many people actually have a cassette player that you can go listen to? Maybe some of the libraries do. But even if they have a cassette player, can you actually record it? And what's the quality of that recording? The other thing I should say is that with some of these cassettes that are floating around Australia, they're still subject to ABC in terms of their copyright restrictions. And obviously, if you do get access to one of these cassettes, there are a number of strict conditions that you must meet before they will allow you to actually even hear the tape. That's all in the past. The tape's out there. It's on the internet. I know that thousands of people have taken their own copy of the tape, and it'll never be destroyed. It'll never be hidden. And again, I'm happy to have played a small role in terms of the story. But one of the big things that I'm focusing this year, Tim, is corruption. So if people know my history, I'm an economist, and around 2018, when I started making the rounds on the internet, I started talking about debt bubbles and economic
Yeah, that
problems
was our
facing the
first
country.
interview.
And and then we sort of went on to fight the in terms of the $10,000 cash ban, where the Morrison government tried to put people in jail for in terms of using physical cash. Then in 2022, I moved on to ASIC, the Australian Securities Investments Commission, and triggered a Senate inquiry looking into the performance issues at ASIC, and now I'm back in 2025, and we're focusing heavily on corruption. And corruption, in my view, is everywhere. And so, on my channel, in the interest of the people, we're going to be focusing quite heavily on this new body called the National Anti-Corruption Commission, because it's already been drowning in scandal, lots of controversy around the NAC.
Yeah, we don't hear anything about it. It was a big deal when Mark Dreyfus when he was Attorney General, passed the legislation to get in the NAC, but we haven't had anything of it since. And in fact, there's been a cloud over the actual NAC commissioner himself.
Indeed. I mean, look, Paul Burton, the NAC commissioner, has a history of protecting elite people. He was the lead person on the Afghan war crimes inquiry, and he found that the low level soldiers had engaged in war crimes, but he gave the senior command, who are all of his mates, a complete exoneration, and they got to keep their medals, even though that the war crimes happened under their happened under their nose. So, and last year there was an Afghan war crime review panel, and the review panel basically overturned the Burton finding, basically said that while the senior command, generals and etc., were not criminally liable for the war crimes, they were liable in the sense that these things happen under their command, and they have to pay a penalty for basically being lax and allowing these things to occur. So there's a lot of question marks about this NAC spending over $150 million now. We're in, I think, month 28, and they haven't received. They haven't produced any major corruption findings. Without saying too much on this program, I put in a major referral in May last year. Here we are in week 73. My matter is still ongoing, and the whole process has been fundamentally flawed by the NAC in 73 weeks. And rather than actually getting on with the job and actually engaging with key witnesses to understand the material and actually go ahead and detect and expose and prosecute corruption, they've basically been running a protection racket using taxpayers' money. And there's a lot more that that I'll be saying on that publicly. And I've had quite a bit of correspondence with the NAC inspector, so I have her position on the record, and I'll be saying quite a bit to both in written form, but also in terms of public comments as well. But no, look, I mean, a lot of people think that Australia is a clean country, but no, we have major amounts of corruption. And one thing I will say, Tim, is that, and this sort of ties in to the pedophile story, is a lot of people think corruption comes in the form of a brown paper bag or some sort of financial inducement, and obviously that form of corruption does happen. But one thing that the Woodrow Commission exposed in the 1990s was where police rig investigations, or they manipulate a process in order to engineer a predetermined outcome. And this is something that Justice Wood called process corruption. And he said that this form of corruption was as equally as bad as financial corruption, because it completely distorts and undermines the criminal justice system. And obviously, in instances where you had the attempts to expose pedophilia, you had state police protecting pedophiles either by rigging processes or not doing their job or taking bribes, etc. So So one of the most insidious forms of corruption in Australia is where people in power manipulate processes in order to engineer a predetermined outcome. I mean that's something that I see everywhere, and a lot of people in a lot of these institutions are not prepared to just get on with the job and do a proper day's work. And that's why, in my view, I think this country is drowning in corruption. And a lot of people think that the country is in decline, and it's some people think that it's almost impossible to turn the country around. I actually take a different view. I think we can you know, we can turn the country around. We can bring the country back into something that we can be proud of, but we have to tackle the corruption. My view is that until the corruption is exposed and we can actually have clean people in positions of power, it's going to be almost impossible to advance the public interest. So that's why the further I dig into some of these areas and with some of the projects I run, and I see the individuals involved in their behavior. I mean that's why I've just basically had enough when the minister basically said that she wasn't going to lift a finger to inform the public about what's going on. So I just said, well, you can't trust the ABC, you can't trust the minister, you can't trust the government. So all you can do is basically have citizens do all the heavy work. Sometimes that does come with consequences, whether it's a civil or criminal liability. But on this case, in terms of this occasion, I think I've been able to get away with it, and I think I fight to live another day. And obviously, we have some big news coming forward on a few other fronts, and I guess we'll sort of see what the fallout of those events when I finally reveal them.
Yes, thank you again for publishing this recording. I mean, we are 100% behind you, and we look forward to you exposing more on the interests of the people, which if you just type that into YouTube, yours and Martin North's channel will pop up. So YouTube hasn't decided to take any, it seems, algorithmic action when the ABC got YouTube to delete the tape. So that's where you can find more of John Adams' work against corruption in the weeks to come. Thank you so much for giving us your time on a Friday night to discuss this. It's been great to catch up again, and I don't need to tell you to keep up the fight. You will.
Of course. No, I was going to say thank you, Tim, and thank you to your audience for having me on. And obviously, for those that have not heard the tape, the best way to access the tape is to go onto X and look at my Twitter account or X account. So my handle is Adams Economics. So you can find me. And then it's the first tweet that's pinned to my account. And the recording goes for 42 minutes, and we released the tape with a 5-minute introduction from Martin North and myself. I mean, I know that in the last few days, people are now learning about the story and they want to hear the tape, and we've sort of directed them into the right areas to go to in terms of where to go listen to it. So again, if you haven't listened to it, even one thing I was just saying in conclusion, Tim, for those people who say they struggle to listen to it, I mean, I don't think you can appreciate evil until you hear the depths of the evil in terms of all of its forms. And so even if people find it difficult to listen to, and maybe they need 2 or 3 attempts to get through the whole tape, I think people hear understand what we're dealing with, because it's only until you shine a light into the darkness can you really expose how things are bad, and obviously you can hopefully set a pathway for truth and justice to prevail.
Yeah, certainly when I listened to it, made me Alex Jones style angry. It's the more you hear of it, the just more you just the rage inside you grows. So yeah, it's it's understandable why people find it hard to get through, but this is what depraved people do, and you also, and what they're doing to the victims as well, and it's shocking, but like you said, you need to understand evil to properly counter it.
Yeah.
Well, all the best, John, and we certainly look forward to the next Interests of the People show with anticipation. Thank you again for your time, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
And that is it for the return of WilmsFront. Now, based on audience feedback on the snapshot reports, many missed my animated style from Tim's News Explosion, so I have an announcement to make. I will be rolling in snapshot reports into regular WilmsFront episodes, and I'm all freelance but still factual style, back on Mondays at 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. There will be about 5 to 6 snapshots per show. T&E is not coming back. Instead, WilmsFront will be the place to be for both snapshot news shows and featured interview shows. So it'll sort of be going back to the beginning of when WilmsFront was launched in 2019, an all-inclusive show. I'll be publishing a Report from Tiger Mountain episode with Richard Wollstonecroft tomorrow. See you all here back on Monday. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. All helps with the algorithm. And of course, you can keep up to date with the latest on the Unshackled Productions on my own social medias at WilmsFront, or on the Unshackled website, or via the Unshackled Substack. So thank you, everyone, for joining the return or relaunch of WilmsFront, and I'll see you all again on Monday evening, 8:30 p.m., back to regular shows. I'm looking forward to it. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting the Unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.